Hey y'all, thanks for stopping by the channel. I'm Infinite Enzo, and this is Watch a Knife Wildlife. Today we're taking a look at the ProTech Strider SNG, one of my absolute favorite knives. And on the wrist, we have the Parnis Big Pilot. Awesome homage watch, really great for the money. So without further ado guys, let's jump into it. So why these two tools in particular? Why the ProTech Strider SNG paired with the Parnis Big Pilot? Well, for me, it's the military aesthetic that both of these have. The Strider in particular has some connections to the military through its extensive use by service members, not necessarily this ProTech version, but the original Strider pattern, which is a manual knife, has been historically very popular with service members. This, however, is really only an appearance that it has that military aesthetic. I don't think there's a whole lot of active duty military folks who are going around using Parnis watches. They're Chinese made, they're not the most reliable things in the world. But if you are looking for something that is a great Flieger design and is very affordable, then this is a great option. So, as always, let's start with a closer look at the knife. Now, longtime viewers of the channel may be familiar with this particular ProTech Strider SNG. If you saw my episode of Takedown Talk, episode 4, I did a deep dive on this knife and I did a detailed disassembly of it, explained how it works, how the automatic functions operate, and how to clean it up and take care of it. So if you'd like to check that out, there's a card above that you can click on and it'll take you right to that video. So this is really going to be more of a long-term review of how I've enjoyed this knife over the years. So if you're not familiar with ProTech, they are a company based out of California that specializes mostly in automatic knives. By which, of course, I mean you deploy the knife by clicking a button and the blade comes out the side, similar to a manual folder, as opposed to an OTF, which of course is an out the front knife. So I really like their attention to detail, their fit and finish. ProTech is very well known for their high levels of quality, their high levels of detail-oriented design, just a really great eye for their work. As you can see here, everything connects very well. Blade centering is maybe not quite perfect, but it's pretty darn close. So big props to ProTech for that. Now, speaking on the blade here, what we have here is a 3.5 inch blade of 154 cm steel. 154 cm is an excellent ingot steel. It's very well balanced. Surprisingly, it's really tough. You would think with a more affordable steel, the toughness would be on the lower end of the scale there, but from my experience with this, it's been fantastic. It also sharpens up very easily and takes a very sticky, sharp kind of edge, so I quite like that a lot. Stainlessness is good as well. However, with this knife in particular, it's been DLC coated, so we don't really have to worry about the blade staining. And I will say that their DLC coating that ProTech produces, it's fantastic, very durable. I have just driven this thing through all kinds of wood and all kinds of things that would typically wear off just a painted coating, but this has not worn hardly at all. I've been very impressed with it. So as I said, the blade length here is 3.5 inches. That is measuring from the end of the handle to the tip of the blade. Because of these two large choils, however, we really only have 2 3/4 of cutting path here. Blade thickness is 1/8 of an inch, which in my opinion is kind of the perfect balance of sliciness but durability. I really like 1/8 inch thickness. I just think it strides the two options very well. Does a good job of that. As you can see, we have some jimping at the top here. Very functional, particularly when you're grabbing onto that choil. You get a really good grip on this thing and it feels like it's not going anywhere. But we'll get to more of that when I talk about the handle. Also, we have 2 blade stops right here that are integrated into the blade itself. They look like thumb studs, but they don't actually function that way. However, what they do achieve, as you can see here, when you deploy the knife, it locks up at this position right here with these 2 blade stops sitting comfortably in these wells on the handle. What that does is it benefits the stability of the knife, definitely helps with reducing potential side-to-side play and also vertical play. You can see the way that those wells hug the thumb studs. I'm sorry, not thumb studs. The way the wells hug those stop bars, it helps in both directions. So I really like seeing that. Definitely something that we see in a few places. We see it with Strider and we see it with Hinderer, and I think there is a lot of benefit to that. You can see here our maker's marks on both sides. This is Strider's logo right here. Very cool logo, kind of a winged sword kind of thing going on there. Definitely has that kind of a warrior motif, which personally I don't really qualify for, but damn, it looks cool, doesn't it? On this side we have ProTech's maker's mark, USA made blade here, and 154 cm. Beautiful maker's marks on both sides, really well done. One of my favorite aesthetic things about this knife is how well they design those maker's marks. As I mentioned earlier, we do have two large choils. The first one, of course, being a finger choil to get your index finger up on there for the detail work, as we all like to say, and the sharpening choil here, which is also very large. I think a little bit egregiously large. I don't think it needed to be that big, and you could even make the argument that it doesn't need to exist at all, and that the cutting path can just end at the end of the finger choil itself. I would prefer to see that. I do understand in some ways why Strider did not elect to do that, because it does protect your finger from running up onto that blade. But when you think about the fact that we are losing, gosh, almost a quarter inch of cutting path right there, wow. It is quite a con to weigh against the pros of having these two well-defined choils. Let me know what you guys think about that. I'd be curious to hear what you think about that. So that's it for the blade. Let's move on to the handle. Now, if you've watched that episode of Takedown Talk that I referenced earlier, you may be thinking, wait a minute, pretty sure that knife used to be black, entirely black. The handle was black too. Well, y'all, I got kind of bored with the black on black, and honestly, the whole operator look has never really been my thing. I'm a big fan of FDE, big fan of tan, and I really like FDE and tan and black combos. I think it looks fantastic. So, I got a can of Duracoat in Black Hawk tan, and I sprayed the handles down, did 4 coats. Now I had to let it cure for 2 weeks, which really sucked, but I'm so happy with the way it came out. It looks fantastic, and the durability has really impressed me as well. You guys may notice some nicks and marks on there. A lot of those I gotta blame my old man for, because the first time I handed him this knife to check it out, after the coating had cured, he immediately dropped it. And I got a little miffed at him about that, but you know, it's fine. And it let me learn that this coating is something really worth being impressed about, because it's held up just so well. That said, they are a little bit expensive, the cans of Duracoat. I think I paid 70 bucks for a can that covered these handles as well as enough for my firearm. So you know, it's definitely a price plunge, but I think it's worth it. I've been very happy with it. So with all that said, let's dive into the dimensions of the handle here. We have a handle length of 4 3/4 inches. It's about ½ an inch thick. The scales here are knurled aluminum scales, and let me tell you, I really like them. I think that this is kind of ProTech's approach to emulating the famous gunner grips that Strider is so well known for. While I don't like them quite as much as I like Strider's gunner grips, I'm still really pleased with them. Very effective in hand, very grippy. Traction is just great, especially when you're up on the choil. This thing is not leaving your hand. As you can see, the butt end of the handle flares as you go down the end here, and that also benefits in your grip strength and preventing it from being removed from your hand. It's really not going to go anywhere when it's tucked into your hand like that. They are, however, a bit blocky. They're clearly squared off, and I will say for long-term cutting, it really begins to hurt after a while, particularly when you're holding it in the standard grip like this, with your finger in this groove right here and your other 4 resting on the back end here. In this grip, it gets really painful after a while. Choil grip is not so bad. It's still not great. But when you're only pulling this out to use it for an instant, it feels pretty good. You're really not going to notice it. It's only really the long-term cutting that is the problematic side of it. As you can see at the spine here, we have some jimping up top, and that meets up beautifully with the jimping on the blade. And in standard grip, your thumb's going to rest right here. Choil grip, your thumb's going to rest up here. So in either grip, you're very well accounted for here. Everything feels good. Feels like it's not going to move too much. So yeah, ergos again, overall, I really want to put the point home that when you're just pulling it out to cut something really quick, the ergos are fantastic. It's really the long term where you start to see the negatives. Taking a look at the construction now, we can see that the pivot is actually an Allen key, curiously enough. I believe it's a 3/16 off the top of my head. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I can tell you that these torque screws here, these 3 torque screws, which go directly into the aluminum on the opposite scale, these are all T10. Don't understand why they decided to go with Allen over T10. Kind of an odd choice in my opinion, but if you guys know if there's any reason why they would do that, feel free to put it in the comments down below. But one of my favorite features of this construction is the fact that for all intents and purposes in the hand, this feels like an integral knife because of the way the scales meet each other. It's obviously it's not flush, but it may as well be in your hand. That's how it feels. Definitely feels like an integral, feels very solid, very sturdy, really great feeling in terms of its durability. I really like that a lot. And like I said, though it's not flush, they do meet up pretty well. You can see here that the surfaces are quite even despite that parting line down the center. As we can see here, there's a hole in the handle where the safety used to be, so these do come stock with a safety from time to time. Some of the models don't have it. I'm not sure what the explanation is for why some models have it and some don't. However, I really don't think that you need it unless you're worried about maybe some younger kids having access to it, or someone that's not super familiar with automatic knives having access to it. As a knife user, I found that I didn't need it at all. So I decided to take mine off. It's very easy once you've taken it apart. You simply unscrew one screw and you take the entire assembly out. Now let's discuss the lock system here. What we have here is a button lock. It's a button lock automatic, to be more specific. So when we click the deployment button here, not only does it fire the knife, but it also serves as the lock. What we have on the inside of the blade is a groove cut out where once the button is depressed, the shaft of the button is basically holding into that groove and holding the blade open. There's absolutely no play up and down, absolutely no play side to side. So I'm inclined to say it's a pretty strong, tough lock. It feels really sturdy in hand. Feels like it's definitely not going to be moving at all. The deployment itself is engaged by a coil spring once the button is depressed. So you have a very fast, very snappy action. If you guys haven't already caught on to that, it's very immediate. It feels really, really satisfying to fire this thing. That said, the first time you fire it, if you're not used to it, it'll definitely give you a little bit of a kick. First time you hand it to somebody, honestly, it may not be a great idea to just go handing this knife to people who, in particular, are not knife people that might go flying out of their hands. So yeah, it is that impulsive, for lack of a better word. It can be closed one-handed as well, so if y'all want to watch the way that I like to do this, to close the knife, you have to press the thumb button down again. So I'm holding it down, use my index finger to get it to about 90 degrees, and then take over with my thumb. Particularly on the jimping. I feel like the jimping really helps with one-handed closing of this. Now, of course, you can always close it two-handed as well, but for ease of use, I prefer one-handed closing. If you want to open it slowly, you can do that too. All you really need to do, click the button holding your hand on the blade, click the button and just let it kind of swoop out. There you go, not a problem at all. So if you're around folks that, you know, for whatever stupid reason, feel threatened by knives, you can kind of ease that a little bit by just, you know, slowly doing it, but still, this is still a pretty mean looking blade. So it may not be the best solution for the lunchroom, if you will. Speaking of the design, let's go ahead and talk about why I like this knife so much. I first saw the Strider SNG on Nick Shabazz's channel, and I remember at the time that I saw it, I thought to myself, like, wow, that is a beautiful design. I've got to have one of those. And then of course I looked into it, and at the time Strider had stopped producing knives, and so I'd kind of given up on ever being able to get one. But then I found out about these ProTech models, and honestly, I really think that this is, if you want to get a Strider design, I really think you should go with the ProTech versions. For one thing, ProTech's fit and finish, ProTech's quality, their attention to detail is so high that you're going to get a great blade for your money. So these are sitting at about anywhere from $225 to up to like $700 depending on the materials used. But for the standard aluminum versions, these are about $225 to, let's say, $300. This one in particular is a limited edition G9 version for the Gathering. I can't remember what year that was, but you can see here the G9 logo. And down here there's a numbering scheme, number 36 of 50. So some folks, y'all might be mad at me for painting the handle on a limited knife, but you know what? This is one of my never sells. and I wanted to make it 100% what I wanted it to be, and it has become that. I really love carrying this knife, even more now because of the Duracoated handles. It's just right up my alley now. But again, speaking of that design, what really moves me about it is the long straight line here on the handle and that slow gradual curve down to that point. That blade shape is somewhat reminiscent of some things that we would see from Spyderco, kind of a leaf shape. I really love that. Of course, the choil as well, which also harkens to Spyderco, but kind of without the goofiness that can come with Spyderco. That's why this knife really speaks to me. Also, yeah, I do love the choils. I love the defined finger grooves and this nice straight line here as well, moving diagonally down to the butt, and then this diagonal section right here moving back up to the top of the handle with jimping as well. You'll see that that functions very nicely in a reverse grip, should you ever need to do that. For whatever reason you might hold a knife in reverse grip for. I've never had a reason, but it works great for that. So let's move on to discussing this pocket clip. Here's the pocket shot of the ProTech SNG. As you can see, the ride and pocket is quite shallow. I'm sure y'all have heard me mention before, but I like a shallow carry. I like being able to grab the knife and pull it out quickly and just have access to it. But I understand why a lot of people prefer deep carry. They don't want people knowing they're carrying a knife, because some people get weird about that. But I like it. That said, there are plenty of deep carry options out there, in particular from MXG gear. So check those out. If you have one, let me know what you think. But anyway, retention's good, comes in and out of the pocket easily enough. I'm not worried about it moving around. If you were running or jogging or walking or climbing or jumping, and even if you were hanging upside down, I don't think this is readily going to leave your pocket. It's going to hold in place very well. But I always like it when you have that good retention, but yet it'll slide out and it'll re-enter the pocket very well. These clips do come straight from Strider, so it's the same clip that you would get on an actual Strider SNG, which is kind of a nice touch. These are titanium, just a simple bent clip. The single screw design is kind of a flaw in some ways. You don't have usually you have 3 screws holding a knife pocket clip in place, but here it's just the one, as well as a tab that sinks into this hole back here. That said, when you really tighten this thing down, it's not going anywhere. Mine hasn't moved really since I last disassembled it. It's just been perfectly steady. A little bit of Loctite and that'll be just fine. All right, y'all, on to the watch here. So what we have here is a Parnis Big Pilot. Parnis is a Chinese company that specializes in homage watches, pretty much. Homage is kind of a nice way of saying a clone, but they're not technically clones because they're not using the branding of the company that they are homaging. So therefore we have the term homaging. In the knife world, clones are highly frowned upon for good reason, but in the watch world, homages are kind of a commonplace thing. Nobody's particularly troubled by homages as far as I know. Now that said, I'm sure there's plenty of watch snobs out there that insist that you have to have the original for the provenance and the historical authenticity. I couldn't disagree with that more, because this watch in particular is based off the IWC Big Pilot. Now the IWC Big Pilot, if you don't already know, is a $7,000 to $10,000 watch, if not more. I really love the design, and I really love that they're not flat out making a copy. It's not a replica. It's just a beautiful design based on a famous World War II era watch. So all of that out of the way, I am a fan of Parnis. If you're not, that's fine, and I understand. But for me, I like what they do, and I like being able to have access to really great designs at an affordable price. Price on this one is right around $100. You can get these on Amazon, and I'll have that link in the description below. But without further ado, let's get into the details here. What we have is a stainless steel case, very nicely finished. As you can see here on the sides, we have a horizontal grain brushing, but on the top and the bezel, beautiful polishing. Looks really, really good. The crown here, nice big crown. No marking on the crown, of course, as this is designed to have no maker's marks on it, kind of evoking back to that military appearance. But yeah, the finishing is really impressive. Our case size is, now these are my measurements. If you see them different elsewhere, feel free to add that below. My own measurements had this at 45 millimeters. This is a big watch. I can't personally, if I'm being honest, I can't really pull it off, but I don't care, I wear it anyway. The reason it's so big is that the pilot's watches during World War II were designed to be that large for the sake of legibility. That was the most important thing above all. So we have a large size here. 45 millimeters, our lug to lug according to my measurements, was 52 millimeters, and we have a lug width of 22 millimeters, so this will accept plenty of straps, and our case thickness came out to 12 millimeters. So surprisingly flat for such a big watch, but the reason behind that would be the movement. Have a look at that, y'all. You gotta admit, that's a good looking manual wind movement here for such an affordable watch. So as I said, this is a manual wind. I'm assuming this is produced by Seagull, who produced the majority of movements for Parnis, as far as I know. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But a very cool movement with some nice little finishing touches. It's not, anything that's going to stop the world turning, but it looks really good. I really like it. And I really appreciate that they put a display back here so we could get a look at the inner workings there. So the way that you wind the movement on this watch is using this big crown. In the closed position, you simply turn it in this direction. Now right now it's fully wound, so I'm not going to turn it, but you simply turn it in this direction. For me, full wind is about 40 turns, but of course it's different for everybody depending on the way that they turn the crown. Speaking of the crown, it is a push-pull design. There is no hacking on this, so that is kind of a flaw, but of course with it being manual wind, that's understandable. So we only have one position. Technically we have two positions. We have the closed position where it winds, and the open position where we set the time. So functions great, very straightforward, very simple. You'll notice here our seconds hand is a small seconds at the 9 o'clock. I really like that layout. I think it looks fantastic. A lot of nice little touches too. We see the red 60 there in contrast to the white indices and the white numerals. And if we look really closely, I don't know if this is going to show up, but that little dial has concentric circles grooved into it. Kind of a nice little contrast to the smooth black dial on the rest of the face here. Numerals, of course, are all Arabic numerals. It's a Type A dial, as you might be used to seeing on Fliegers. Very functional. Very legible, all about being able to read it at a glance. Up here at the 12, we see our traditional Flieger 12 o'clock marking. The idea there is that it's supposed to allow the pilot or the end user to be able to identify which way is up in low lighting conditions. Works really well for that. However, where this watch really fails is the lume. So it really isn't the best watch for low lighting conditions. The lume on this thing is terrible. In fact, it's so bad I'm not even going to bother with a lume shot today. It's not even worth looking at. Do not buy this if you're a lume snob. You are going to be very disappointed. So our water resistance is 50 meters. Basically, don't put this thing anywhere near water. I think you'd probably be okay washing your hands or doing the dishes. Don't swim with it. Don't get in the shower with it. Don't do anything. That would really that would really bring water into the picture in a meaningful way. So moving on, our strap, as you can see here, this is not the stock strap. The stock strap on this, when I got it at least, wasn't great. It was kind of this crappy faux croc strap. This is faux croc as well, but it's much better done. But the stock strap is not great. I highly recommend you get something a little bit better. This strap is from Dasari, and it is a beautiful croc design with the rivets worked into it. Also, those rivets have nice concentric circles, kind of matches up with that dial. I like that quite a lot. But the rivets, of course, harken back to the straps that you would see on watches of that World War II era. So it's definitely, for me, in the way that I've set this piece up, I'm definitely going for that historical kind of vibe. I really enjoy that about it. The hands also quite nice. The sword hands that you would typically see on a Flieger, they have, as you can see, they have this nice reflective quality. When you're looking at it dead on, the hands appear to be black with loomed plots on the inside, and then when you turn it at an angle, they kind of pick up a gray color. I like that very much. I would prefer it if they were just flat out gray. I think that would look good, but I do like having the shift in tonality. I think it looks really great. We also have a double dome sapphire crystal up here. It works fantastic. I have worn this thing quite a bit and there's not a single scratch on it. I really like the way the dome has been designed as well because, as I mentioned earlier, the primary function of this is legibility. Quickly see it at a glance and know what time it is. The way that the dome is designed, we don't really have a lot of obscuring going on, which is a good thing in that regard because this is meant to be read quickly. So even at an angle, you'll still be able to read it pretty readily. So nice touch there with the sapphire. And here's a quick shot of it on the wrist just to show you guys what I mean when I say it doesn't technically work for my wrist. I really can't pull it off, but you know what? Life's short, do what you want, and I still think this is a cool watch, so I do it anyway. Definitely a big old dinner plate though. Man, look at that thing. However, again, when you consider what these were meant for, what this design was meant for, I should say, not this particular watch, these designs were meant to be big and meant to be easily read, so it does fit into that very well. So yeah, just one last look at it, and let's move on to closing thoughts. So all in all, y'all, what are my thoughts on this watch? I do understand how some people tend to look down on companies like Parnis. You know, it's a Chinese company making cheap watches that's mimicking much more famous watches. However, I'll say again, they're not using the maker's marks of the companies they're mimicking. These are really just homages. And there's plenty of famous homages out there. For example, Steinhardt, a German company, makes great watches with ETA movements. They are particularly homaging Rolex. Plenty of companies out there homaging Rolex. Casio with the Duro, Invicta with the Pro Diver. So, you know, a lot of that going on. So that's why I'm not particularly offended by homaging. But yeah, you're getting a lot of cool here without a lot of cash. Again, this is roughly $100, you know, compare that against $7,000 to $10,000. You can get these much more easily, they're much more available. Just hop on Amazon, you'll have it in 2 days, you know, so that's basically all I have to say on that. I just think it's a lot of cool for, you know, a very good price. Let me know what you guys think. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. All right, y'all, well, thanks again for joining me today on Watch a Knife Wildlife. Today we looked at the ProTech Strider SNG, roughly around $250 for a really excellent design from a very well-known designer, and an excellent quality from ProTech's manufacturing. And of course the Parnis Big Pilot, very affordable watch that has the look of a much more expensive design, coming in at $100. Really great deal. So let me know what you guys think. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'd love to hear your comments, your thoughts, and I will see you guys in the next one.